So Israel has ordered a total siege of the Gaza Strip after announcing the area will be cut off from food, fuel and electricity as well as water supplies.
It comes 2 days after surprise attacks by Hamas left hundreds dead. 9 U.S. citizens are among the casualties, while more than 10 British citizens are currently feared dead or missing.
Hospitals in Gaza filled up with more injured and dead on Monday as Israel continued to strike back against Hamas's deadly surprise attack on the weekend. According to Palestinian officials, dozens of children were among the hundreds of residents killed by airstrikes. The Israeli military said on Monday it struck hundreds of Hamas and Islamic Jihad targets in the Gaza Strip overnight, and that combat divisions were still fighting Islamist militants at 7 or 8 sites near Gaza as more Hamas fighters continued crossing into Israel. It comes 2 days after Islamist militant forces killed hundreds of Israelis and abducted dozens more in the deadliest raid into Israeli territory in half a century. There are worries about the conflict spreading, with Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah militia exchanging fire with Israeli forces on Sunday. Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Robert Wood, spoke after an urgent Security Council meeting on Sunday.
We're working hard, as I know other countries in the region are, to try to prevent this conflict from spreading.
The envoy for the United Arab Emirates, Lana Nusseibeh, said council members are working towards de-escalation, with a priority on protecting civilians from further harm.
What we need to lead to right now is a ceasefire, an end to the violence, and the resumption of negotiations down the line. But we're not at that state yet, as you can imagine.
Meanwhile, the UN appealed for the creation of humanitarian corridors to bring food into Gaza. It said at least 70,000 Palestinians are seeking shelter in schools it runs there.
Let's talk more about the situation in Gaza and Israel now. We're joined by the Afro-Middle East Centre Executive Director, Na'eem Jeenah. Very good evening to you, Na'eem. Good to see you. So, a lot of what's been said about the situation since Saturday in the last 48 hours especially has been about the element of surprise. How is it that Hamas was able to catch the Israelis seemingly napping in this instance? Was it as unexpected for you?
Absolutely. I think I was as surprised as everyone else except that group of soldiers that went into Israel on Saturday morning, certainly.
And given where we are now, you've got the Israelis now ordering a total siege of Gaza. They are now not going to allow in any basics to go into the area, no water, no electricity, no other supplies as well. Where does that leave the civilians of Gaza? Is it worth it? Were the efforts by Hamas, the attacks, were they worth the suffering of the ordinary people of Palestine?
Well, first let me say that the decision to impose the tighter siege now, because Gaza has been under siege for 17 years, should be read alongside Netanyahu's statement that once the IDF finishes with Gaza, it will be a desert island, which means basically that they are threatening genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, because if people can't escape, 2.5 million people in 360 square kilometers, they're basically looking for genocide. But to answer your question directly, Palestinians for the past 8 decades have been suffering under land theft, torture, near genocide, apartheid, colonization and occupation. Their lives have been made entirely miserable. The number of people, including children, that have been killed. When you look at statements now from ordinary residents in Gaza, they are saying that they are fearful of what's going to happen tonight, because they expect every night that Israel's bombing is going to increase, but they have full confidence in the resistance, as they call it. And so I think that ordinary Palestinian civilians are saying that they're tired of living as slaves for whom, in the case of Gaza over the past 17 years, the Israeli policy has been, as one Israeli spokesperson said, to keep them hungry but not to starve them to death. No one can live like that. And so when they're forced to live like that for 17 years, they would welcome any freedom from that, even if that freedom means, as they would say, martyrdom. And so the support for the resistance in Gaza is huge, and that's irrespective of whether people are Muslim or Christian or atheist, whether they support Hamas or support any other group. The resistance is a mixture of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front, which is a Marxist organization, even elements of Fatah, which is a nationalist organization.
Right.
So I think that what we're seeing is that the people, the Palestinian people, are behind this effort.
And I want to talk about that because you mentioned just how fragmented leadership within Gaza and the broader Palestine has been over the years. And some have said that that's part of why there's not been as much progress as Palestinians would have wanted on the issue of occupation and the other issues that they've taken, for example, to the United Nations over the decades. Now, in Israel, the attacks by Hamas on Saturday appear to have united people. Even those who were anti-Netanyahu on Friday night are now rallying together because they feel, as Israel, they're all under attack. I wonder if the events of the last 3 days will really have the same impact in Palestine, and if so, would it lead to greater, perhaps more long-standing unity?
Look, I think it's not correct for outsiders to tell an oppressed people how united they should or should not be. Certainly in our own struggle in South Africa, we had different tendencies in the liberation movement. We were not united. In the 1980s, for those of us who are old enough to remember that, we were literally, and I'm not talking about collaborationists like the IFP or Inkatha in those days, I'm talking about the liberation movement, Africanists, Congressites, black consciousness adherents. We were killing each other in the townships. I mean, this is the reality. It's part of our history. So we shouldn't be telling oppressed people how united they should be in order to prosecute their struggle. But on the question of now, what we are seeing, if we look at media interviews, for example, across the networks, BBC, CNN, all of these, spokespersons for the Palestinian National Initiative, which is neither Hamas nor Fatah, spokespersons for the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, spokesperson for Hamas, are essentially saying the same thing. They're saying that Palestinians have a right to resist, Palestinians are exercising their right to resist, that when they attempt to exercise their protest against the occupation, colonization and apartheid that they face through peaceful means like boycotts, divestment and sanctions, they get labeled anti-Semitic and they're told that this is violence. When they try to hold arts festivals, they are told this is anti-Semitic. No matter what statement they make in support of their own people, they're told this is anti-Semitic, this is violence, etc., etc. And so they're exercising, in terms of international law, an occupied people has the right to resist that occupation by whatever means is necessary. Right. They are exercising that right, and it seems to me, at least, that the Palestinian political factions are united in saying the same thing.
And some in the West are now reviewing aid for the people of Gaza and Palestine. We're seeing announcements today from the Germans, for example, to that effect. Austria has also said similar things today. Where will that leave the long-suffering people of Gaza?
Germany and Austria have not been giving any aid to Gaza. There's been no Western aid going into Gaza in reality, except for minimal amounts that are discountable. They have been sending some aid to the West Bank. Their withdrawal of that aid means that the lives of Palestinians in the West Bank will get worse, and the deaths of children who starve and die in the West Bank as a result is on their heads. They have consistently, for the past 8 decades, supported an occupation that is illegal under international law, supported a colonization that's illegal under international law, supported apartheid that's illegal under international law, and the deaths of all of those victims are on their heads. They can't now say that they're going to punish the victims even further by withdrawing that aid. Palestinians, frankly, from all that I'm hearing, are sick and tired of this kind of using aid as a stick. The weapons that they used on Saturday morning and since Saturday did not come from the West. The tools of their liberation are not coming from the West. Whenever the European Union builds a school, Israel bombs it, and that's the end of it, and the European Union builds another one without there being any repercussions for Israel. So until the West, the Europe, the UK, and the US, until they are willing to actually take action against those who are the illegitimate occupiers and violations of international law by Israel, Well, I don't think Palestinians care that Germany and Austria are withdrawing their aid.
Let me get your thoughts then on how the very frosty, to say the least, relations between Israel and Iran have been drawn into what's happening here. Reports suggesting today out of the US that Iran was involved in the planning of the Hamas attack on Saturday. Iran has denied any involvement, but also issued a warning to the United States and Israel should there be any attempt to draw it into the violence that we're seeing now playing out in Israel and Gaza. How much of what's happening between Israel and Gaza or Palestine actually has to do with the long-standing dispute, the long-standing fight between the Israelis and the Iranians?
Firstly, the Wall Street Journal article is quite nonsensical in the way it puts together a whole range of meetings and makes it into a conspiracy. But secondly, the creation of the State of Israel was in 1948, long before the Iranian Revolution, which took place in 1979. From 1948 till 1979, Iran was a strong supporter and ally of Israel. The PLO was formed long before the Iranian Revolution. Palestinians have been resisting Zionist occupation long before the Iranian Revolution. So to suggest, as is now being suggested by some, that this is all to do with Iran is firstly nonsensical and disingenuous, and secondly, it does again what Israel has been doing to Palestinians: rob them of their agency, rob them of their humanity, rob them of the intellect to make their own decisions. What we saw happening on Saturday morning was a Palestinian action decided and determined on by Palestinians in order to gain Palestinian liberation and not for the sake of any other agenda.
Na'eem Jeenah, good to speak to you. Afro-Middle East Centre Executive Director, speaking to us on News at Prime tonight.